Okay, I want you to picture this. It's late. The wind is just lightly tapping against the window panes, and the rest of the house is completely draped in this thick, suffocating darkness. Que de miedo, right? Just so scary. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely unpack a story that has been whispered at sleepovers, passed around by campfires, and forwarded through massive internet chain emails for literally decades now. It's a tale that perfectly balances our deep, primal unease with the fun thrill of a safe scare. So, if you can, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's unravel one of the most enduring, absolute classic, and truly terrifying campfire tales of the modern age. To really get into this, I want to put you directly into the shoes of our protagonist. I want you to imagine you're a teenage girl, and you're taking on a brand new babysitting gig for a very wealthy family. You've just arrived at their home, and maybe it's out in Newport Beach, California, because that's where some of the most famous versions of the story claim it happens, and it is one of those ridiculously large houses. You know the kind, a massive labyrinth of rooms, high ceilings, lots of shadows. The parents give you the standard rundown, they tell you to just stay put in one specific room once the kids are asleep, and then they leave for a late dinner. You hear that heavy front door completely click shut, and suddenly you are entirely alone in a strange, totally silent house. Now let me ask you, what would you do if you suddenly started to realize that the seemingly harmless home decor around you might actually be watching your every move?
So the night actually progresses exactly as you'd expect. Step 1, you put the two young children to bed. Thankfully, they go down without a fuss. Step 2, you head right into the parents' bedroom, or in some versions, the main living room, because they have satellite TV and you really want to watch a specific show. You just settle in on the couch, get cozy, and start watching. But then step 3 happens. Out of the very corner of your eye, you notice it, just standing there. A life-sized clown statue, completely motionless in the dim, shadowy corner of the room. Its painted-on, exaggerated grin feels just entirely out of place in this fancy house. You really try to ignore it, telling yourself you're just being silly. But as the minutes tick by, you inevitably reach step 4. You start to get this overwhelming, skin-crawling sensation that its fleshy eyes are staring right at you, literally boring into the side of your head. The air in the room suddenly grows freezing cold. The silence of the house feels incredibly heavy. Finally, you just can't take the feeling anymore. You pick up the phone and you dial the parents.
The dad answers, and you ask him a simple, totally innocent question. You say, "Hey, the kids are fast asleep in bed, but is it okay if I switch rooms? Honestly, this life-size clown statue in the corner is really creeping me out." And then, there is a long, agonizing pause on the other end of the line. The father's voice drops entirely. He is completely devoid of any humor, any warmth, and he delivers the absolute chilling punchline of our story. He says, "Take the children and get out of the house right now. We'll call the police. We don't have a clown statue." I mean, just take a second and imagine that sheer absolute drop in your stomach. Imagine all the blood draining from your face. How would you even react in that terrifying, paralyzing moment, suddenly realizing that you are locked inside a house with an active intruder?
Section 1. Anatomy of an Urban Legend. How the Myth Morphed.
Okay, let's break the fourth wall here for a second and shift gears. We're going to step out of our spooky campfire setting and go right into full-blown investigator mode. We really need to dive into this and destripa la leyenda, debunk the legend, completely tear it apart. Because while that story I just told you is undeniably terrifying, it is entirely a work of modern fiction. It's pure folklore. But here's the thing, like all really great folklore, it didn't just pop up out of thin air. It evolved, it shape-shifted, and it morphed over time to reflect the very specific anxieties of the people who were telling it. If we look all the way back at the viral internet chain emails from around 2004, we actually see two wildly different versions of the villain in this story. In one version, the police rush to the house to find that the clown is an escaped convict, this bloodthirsty killer holding a knife, just biding his time, ready to strike. But then, in another highly circulated version, the threat is entirely different. The statue turns out to be a diagnosed schizophrenic, sometimes described specifically as a little person, who is in a totally catatonic state. In this version, he had been secretly living inside this sprawling, wealthy house for weeks, just surviving off their leftover food and silently watching the children sleep at night. Notice how dramatically the villain changes there? That tells us so much about the culture sharing the story. The myth literally morphs in real time to play on completely different, highly specific societal fears, all depending on who happens to be forwarding the email that day.
And that leads us right into this next crucial point. Why did this particular story, out of all the scary stories out there, explode across the early internet? Well, it's because it perfectly, almost surgically, encapsulates the absolute deepest, darkest fears of contemporary Western society. First off, you have the terrifying concept of surreptitious home invasion. It's the idea that our homes, which are supposed to be our ultimate sanctuaries of safety and security, can be quietly and invisibly breached. Second, the story taps into the vulnerability of solitary teenage girls working late at night, who are unfortunately often viewed by society as sitting ducks. Third, it preys on the universal, deeply primal fear for the safety of our defenseless children. There is nothing more vulnerable than a sleeping child. And finally, the overarching fear of the other. Whether that other is an escaped convict, a homeless person hiding up in your attic, or someone suffering from an unmanaged mental illness. When you put all these ingredients together, this legend becomes the ultimate cautionary tale. It masterfully blends the completely mundane, everyday responsibility of babysitting with the sheer, heart-stopping terror of unseen danger.
Section 2. Debunking the statue. The clinical autopsy.
Now, as captivating as this story is, the lingering question always remains, doesn't it? Did this actually happen to someone, somewhere? Let's consult the real experts who track these things down for a living. Folklore researchers and fact-checkers, most notably the incredible team over at Snopes, have conducted a full, thorough autopsy on this legend. And I'm going to give you the definitive fact-check results right now. First, there are absolutely 0 police reports anywhere matching this crime. 0. Second, there are 0 news records, 0 newspaper clippings, 0 local TV segments of this event ever occurring in Newport Beach, California, or literally anywhere else in the world. And finally, as the researchers very astutely and kind of hilariously point out, homicidal maniacs just do not typically pose as home decor. Now sure, infamous real-life serial killers like John Wayne Gacy absolutely did dress as a clown, but that was for the specific purpose of entertaining at neighborhood parties and charity events. He wasn't breaking into people's living rooms and pretending to be a lifeless piece of wooden furniture for hours on end. So you can definitely breathe a massive sigh of relief here. The clown statue killer is pure, 100% scary fiction.
However, I really wouldn't be doing my job as your host if I didn't tell you the whole truth. There actually is one, and literally only one, verifiable, legally documented incident of a clown statue attacking someone. But as you're about to see, it is really not the horror movie setup you might be expecting at this point.
The year was 1992, and the location was Noblesville, Indiana. And what happened was, a life-sized Ronald McDonald statue actually toppled over onto a 6-year-old girl. Seriously. It was a bizarre, completely freak accident, but it was incredibly unfortunate because the heavy statue actually severed the fleshy part of her fingertip. Obviously, super traumatic for a little kid. Thankfully, the doctors were able to fully reattach it, though she was sadly left with a permanently malformed fingernail. Because of this bizarre injury, the family took it to court, and the courts officially awarded her damages to the tune of exactly $41,400. So there you have it. That is the one and only true danger a clown statue has ever posed to humanity in the entire documented public record.
Section 3. The roots of claustrophobia. The science of the scare.
But you know, this brings us to a really fascinating pivot point in our explainer. If we know the story is totally fake, and we know that real, living clowns aren't actually hiding in the corners of our living rooms, why are we still so deeply, viscerally terrified of painted smiles? Why did the internet latch onto a clown as the ultimate boogeyman, instead of, say, a burglar in a ski mask or a monster under the bed? Welcome to the science of the scare. We actually have a formal, clinical term for this: coulrophobia. It's defined as an extreme or irrational fear of clowns. And this isn't just a mild dislike. It is known to cause genuine physiological responses in people, like severe anxiety, sweating, and tachycardia, which is a rapidly racing heart rate. And it is incredibly widespread. In fact, a major study conducted by the University of Sheffield over in England actually surveyed over 250 children. Do you know what the results were? They found that the children universally disliked clown images when they were used as decor in hospitals. Even the older teenagers in the study found the clown images frightening and entirely unknowable. The researchers noted something incredibly profound. As adults, we constantly make assumptions about what works for kids, so we paint clowns on pediatric ward walls. But children actually read that painted face as something deeply, inherently unnerving.
So let's actually trace how we got here chronologically, because it turns out clowns were literally never meant to be purely good. If we jump back to the 1400s, you have medieval jesters. They were the only people allowed to actively mock the king, which meant they existed entirely outside the normal social hierarchy. That made them untrustworthy, unpredictable outsiders. Fast forward to the 1500s, and we get the Italian harlequins in theater. These were characters specifically known for being mischievous, conniving, and morally bankrupt tricksters. It really wasn't until the 1800s that the friendly, white-faced circus clowns we kind of recognize today emerged, performing primarily for children under the big top. But as we all know, that wholesome image did not last. By the 1970s and 80s, you had real-life horrors like the aforementioned John Wayne Gacy. You combine that terrible reality with massive, iconic pop culture monsters like that horrifying clown doll in the 1982 movie Poltergeist, the cult classic 1988 film Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and of course Stephen King's Pennywise, and society forever cemented the clown as an icon of absolute pure terror.
And this history brilliantly sets up the psychological genius behind the fear, which a renowned folklore expert named Benjamin Radford explains absolutely perfectly. Why does the actual makeup terrify us so much? Well, first, thick grease paint acts exactly like a mask. It makes the wearer entirely anonymous. And human psychology dictates that if we don't know who someone is, they are fundamentally unaccountable for their actions. They could do anything, and we wouldn't know who to blame. Second, that heavy paint completely strips away vital facial expression information. Think about it. We can't see if the person underneath is disgusted, surprised, angry, or plotting something sinister. Third, because those natural emotional cues are totally gone, it leaves us with only their erratic, exaggerated physical actions to try and judge their intent. And finally, and I think this is the most fascinating part, researchers in a 2023 psychology study noted that a clown's stereotypically stark white face, paired with those highly pigmented blood-red lips, can actually subconsciously evoke thoughts of disease, fever, and contagion in the human brain. A painted smile is inherently hiding something, and our primal human survival instincts are just screaming at us to stay far, far away from what we cannot clearly read.
Section 4. Why we crave the scare, the power of folklore.
So, bringing this all together, knowing all of this, knowing for an absolute fact that the babysitter story is completely fabricated, and deeply understanding all the psychological evolutionary triggers of the makeup itself, why on earth do we keep retelling the story of the babysitter and the clown statue? Why does this specific urban legend endure year after year, generation after generation? Well, the crucial takeaway here is summarized so beautifully by that folklore expert we mentioned, Benjamin Radford. He notes that the archetype of the clown represents a fascinating blend of horror and humor, laughter and fear, just this fascinating duality. We continually crave this story because it perfectly, seamlessly balances our primal unease with the amazing thrill of a safe scare. It takes our absolute safest spaces, the quiet of our own homes, the familiar, boring routine of watching TV late at night, and it introduces a terrifying what if. We retell it over and over because surviving the story gives us a rush. It gives us a controlled, safe way to process our very real, very deep anxieties about all the unknown threats that might be lurking just outside our doors, or perhaps just inside our field of vision.
And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our investigation into the babysitter and the clown statue. It truly is a masterclass in modern folklore, a striking reflection of our deepest societal vulnerabilities and an incredible testament to the enduring power of a truly creepy concept. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. You've heard the evidence. You know it's just a story. You know the hard facts. But later on, when you turn off your lights tonight and the house eventually settles into total pitch-black silence, will you still find yourself checking the dark corners of your room? You know, just in case. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Stay curious, stay observant, and sleep well tonight if you can.